coffee's cold, and I hope, being a former teacher, I hope you can hear me, speak loud and clearly, and ask that you all do the same when you participate. So welcome. I want to just, on behalf of our organization, Advocates for Public Education Policy, welcome you to our second event in our series with Dr. Lorenzo Trujillo. Oh, you got it? All right. Very good. Yay! All right. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Persistence prevails. So our agenda, I hope you got one when you walked in. And I hope you also got a brochure, because that really explains what our organization is about. And very briefly, there really was no organization until we formed that really pushed back against the DFER policies that were in place, or the DFER reform movement, and funded by huge amounts of money and making lots of profit. So it was actually Dr. Tom Griggs, that had this idea, and we became a 501c4, and then we split off just recently into a 501c3. So we are the education advocacy part of what we're trying to do. So our mission is to educate the public and policymakers on what damage the reform movement has done to our school system and to our children especially, but also not to just complain, but to look forward and to make sure that the policies that are made by our policymakers actually are policies that work for schools, teachers, and our students especially. So we're a little bit behind because of the technical difficulties. So we're going to try to hurry this along, because I know you've carved out 2 hours of your day today to be with us today, and we don't want to overstep that. So we will get started. So our guest speaker today is Dr. Lorenzo Trujillo. After he speaks, we will have some of our board members get up here, and we'll have a couple prompts for them to sort of, so you get to know who we are that sits on the board. And then we are going to put you all to work. We're going to break into groups, and we're going to pick your brains, because as I look in the audience, I see a wealth of experience and knowledge. And so I'm just thrilled. I wish that I could introduce every single person here, but I'm hoping as we work in the small groups that we'll all get to know each other. So Dr. Lorenzo Trujillo has been an advocate for public education and children for many, many years. When you got your invitation, you got a bio on him. It is very extensive, from working on truancy, to being a principal of an alternative school, to being a professor at CU, to being a professor here at Metro University, to being a law professor, working on ballot issues. He has been an active participant in our community for children. So we got a timekeeper back there trying to keep me on time here. So without further ado, we're thrilled to have Dr. Lorenzo Trujillo speak to us today. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you today, and I'm really appreciative of your time, because time is one of the most precious things we own. As we know, as you get to be my age, you'll realize that. So I want to talk to you, well, first of all, welcome you, but I want to talk to you about a young man who entered Green Mountain High School, and he was struggling, and he didn't want to go to school, and he was off in truant. And in that truancy, he started to flunk out of school. But the teachers, those magical people, the teachers, we all know teachers who have great, tremendous influence in our lives. Well, this young man would eventually graduate from Green Mountain High School, and he eventually got a PhD from UCLA. and now is one of the premier trumpet players in the United States, ranked along with Wynton Marsalis and others. I'm talking about my son. So, I guess I can brag about my son, right? I mean, let me tell you about him. It was in, he went in 1997 to Green Mountain High, where he got the Louis Armstrong Award and another award for excellence in jazz. His graduation present to us was he directed Vivaldi's Four Seasons with no music, and he played it on the violin. But of course, you know, in that process, he rebelled against me with the violin. I'm a violinist. And he said, I want to play trumpet. And he went to trumpet. Well, in that same concert, he directed Chuck Mangione's Children of Sanchez, also without music. He's gone on to be one of the nation's, like I said, stellar musicians. You know, right after he graduated, he was in a band called Yo Flaco. They played pop music. And they won the best Latin band by the Westward Music Awards. And then you all see this on TV all the time, the American Music Awards. His band and him were awarded the best band in that area. Well, he was picked up soon. He started here and studying with Ron Miles, the master teacher here. And he then became, he went on to get picked up by Jamie Ebersol at University of Louisville, Kentucky, where he studied jazz. And from there, he was picked up by Cal Arts, the Disney School. He became a Hollywood studio musician, but UCLA picked him up. So then he got his PhD. From there, he went on to play with most of the major artists in the United States at that time, like Aretha Franklin and Lady Gaga, Tony Bennett, you know, others, Alejandro Fernandez, and he was the principal trumpet with the Los Angeles Larry Crawford for 2 seasons. Well, since 2012, he's been one of the lead trumpets with Pershing's Own, which is the United States President's Army band that plays for all special events. That kid would have flunked out of school. That kid would have not made it. He was on the trek, but the music program kept him in school. Well, you know, that's the story of many of our underserved students. Our underserved students are students from low-income backgrounds, underrepresented in the academic and social hierarchy of society. You know, they're the racial, ethnic minorities and first-generation students. These students do not fit into the paradigm of WASP America. They're prejudiced by the color of class. Color of class includes socioeconomic status, poor backgrounds. They could be white students, or ethnic students, ethnicity, and first-generation students learning English as a second language. We see that so much in our schools today. These students flourish in music, art, and PE, and why do they that? Because these subjects transcend culture and are accessible to everyone regardless of language. They need these academic experiences to find the love and joy in learning. My son is an example of that. I might even go as far as saying I'm an example of that. That's why I do music, you know, because it brings me love and happiness and joy. Well, music and arts in the schools went through, since testing with deep consequences, the arts have suffered under third-tier status. Reading and math are the end-all subjects of study in our schools. These educational disciplines are eliminated, not counted, and put aside to periodic experiences. We know from research that each of us has a distinct learning style. Some of us learn from visual experiences, some from auditory experiences, from some reading and writing, and others kinesthetic experiences where they learn by doing. Each learning type responds best to a different method of teaching. Not all students will learn seated at a desk. They will not learn in the drill and kill method. We know that that does not work. But yet we continue to pursue that avenue with kids. You know, I was talking to a principal just the other day, and she told me with increased accountability of testing and the higher cut scores these kids are being put to, forced into a life of poverty. And so we need to find an answer to that. We do what we measure. If our tests only measure math and language literacy, we're not providing our youth with a quality educational experience. We are creating a group of throwaway children who will not succeed. My son and others, many whom I teach here at Metro, must be able to succeed, and they do through music and arts as a way to other areas. And so I want to go to, I had originally thought I'd explain each of these laws to you, but we don't have time. But I know there's a follow-up session that will be given by this organization, and they're going to go over this, each of these. You know, the No Child Left Behind Act, which created the testing in December 2015. Congress passed Every Student Succeeds Act to replace that. And then we saw a breath of light, the innovation school that could be created within the school system. And then even another breath came forward, and that's the community school. The community school is within an innovation school. Now, one thing to know is that the issue is, what are the consequences of poor performance? That's really the question we have to look at, and that's what I'm going to propose today. And that's what I'm asking. I know Senator Byrd is going to be looking at this. But what are the consequences? In the innovation schools, there's actually 16 districts with 102 innovation schools in the state of Colorado. And that's roughly 5.2% of the overall population. Now, Senator Zenziger, if I said that right, and Representative Titone and were successful in passing this innovation school. And an innovation school allows for more innovation. But what happens when there's poor performance? Well, the Colorado Department of Education is strapped with the federal law. And so they immediately put the schools get a status as under a performance plan, improvement plan, priority improvement, turnaround, or insufficient data. And then the district gets one of these status. And then what happens? Well, they have to go into, they can be a turnaround school. Today in the Denver Post, you probably saw that Central High School in Pueblo has to go to a management system. The online schools, they're $600,000 in debt. You know, I was one of the creators of that, and I was shocked to see that, but they have to have a manager now. Now, these are things that are under the current rules. Now, what we have is, if we look at Senate Bill 19204, which passed last year, Senator Byrd, Senator Story, and Representative Byrd and others, they were successful in passing this. This system allows for accountability system partners, and that's a big deal. This means a public or private institution, entity, or a nonprofit entity that works with local education providers to implement education policy initiatives and that has demonstrated effectiveness in providing support to local education providers. I think this is the way we gotta go. The new law further provides schools the ability to determine student success through supplementing the statewide performance indicators by using additional measures of achievement. And you know what? Those additional indicators may include non-academic student outcomes, which may reflect changes in student engagement, attitudes, and mindsets. That's us. That's us, music and arts. You know the other thing that the bill did that I really like? And I applaud the legislature for this. It'd be okay to create legislation, but let's go a step further. They have actually added funding $25,000 up to $50,000 for a single local education provider, and that must not exceed $75,000 for a group of providers. So there's money. So it's not just legislation without money, which often happens. Well, in this session, Representative Byrd is proposing a new bill. And that new bill is going to call for an audit of our accountability systems to better understand what is really necessary and what results matter. This is important. You know, the State Board of Education works under the legislation that comes from the feds and the state. They cannot supersede that legislation. But what they can do is, if they get legislation like this one, it's from her 219 bill, it says that, states that that is in the best interest of the state to strengthen accountable systems for public schools and the school districts by encouraging and supporting the development of local accountability systems that may inform the continuous improvement of the state's public accountability system. So there is hope. There is a lot of hope. Well, I'm going to give you one more story. It was, and I'm really pleased, Ron Gallardo's here. Ron Gallardo was one of our first teachers. And thank you, Representative Story, for joining me. Just told your story.
I just saw that and I'm thrilled. Thank you.
So, at any rate, in 1978 and 79, I opened the first, I completed a doctoral study for low achieving failing students at Mission High School in San Francisco, California. We studied there all of these areas of the self-concept. And we also studied their cognitive growth. I was working with low-achieving students, students who were failing, students who had dropped out. I said, give them to me. I will take them, and I will work with them. I gave them a curriculum based on the arts, music, folklorico, and those kids, for 97% of them, did graduate. And their self-concept went up in significant measures on standard accountability tests. You know what? Then I repeated that experience. I repeated that experience in 1997 at Adams City High School in Commerce City. I put together, I was put in charge of a Keep Kids in School project. And so this district said, we don't have any money, we eliminated the arts. I said, well then, how do we get money? You have to go to a referendum. You have to go to the public. We did. We won that. We won that, and I personally hired the teachers. Ron was one of them. I personally hired the teachers that came in and started these programs in the schools. I started a mariachi program at Adams City High School and a folklorico program. And we turned around the district from one of the lowest achieving school districts in the state, where it's unfortunately, once again, to one of the highest achieving in terms of receiving awards from the governor's improvement projects, and it was an amazing experience. So what does all this tell us? It tells us, missed that slide, but you heard it. So what do we measure? If our tests only measure math and literacy, we're not providing our youth with a quality educational experience. Music and art transcend culture and are accessible to everyone regardless of language. All students need these academic experiences to find the love and joy of learning. Success in one area will lead to success in other areas. So, I propose, this is my proposal, and I would like to see the advocates for public education policy be leaders in this, and I think we can. I love what Senator Byrd is proposing. I'd like to see her bill go beyond understanding what works and why, but I propose that we move away from high-stakes testing as the only indicator of learning. Yeah. We must implement performance-based assessments, create more options for the State Board of Education to help turn around schools, stop labeling schools, and push for a change at the federal level and state level. I propose that we look at alternatives to consequences under the Colorado State Law of Accountability. We should establish a legislatively appointed commission to recommend an evolution in our accountability system. Representative Byrd's proposed legislation will look at what is really necessary and what results matter. I ask that we go one step further to redefine alternatives to consequences, much in line with the development evolutions as seen in Senator Zenziger's community school philosophy and as put forth by Representative Byrd's Senate Bill 19204. By the way, it's now Colorado State law. Governor signed that. You know, there is a legislative commission history. And that, you know, I chaired back in the dark ages in 2007. the Trujillo Commission on Online Education. It was a legislatively appointed commission. We went throughout the state, and what we did was we gathered information, and we put together the information for the legislature, and that information was actually put into the new bill. You know, the Denver Post reported from recent data, A+ Colorado, a nonprofit that does education research, says no particular format is better for all Denver public school students. The report examined traditional, innovation, and charter schools. The majority of Hispanic and Black students in DPS attend charter or innovation schools, while the majority of white students attend traditional ones. If we can assume this data holds true, then it is in the best interest for all schools to embrace evolutionary enhancements to our accountability systems. We need to look at, number one, supporting the legislators as they come forth with alternative consequences, alternative measures. But in that process, I think it's up to us, especially all of you in here. Some of you, you're some of the finest thinkers that have a history in this. We need to put together and support a commission, ideally a legislatively endorsed commission that's going to say, this is what we think should be done. And then even go a step further, if we can, effect and communicate with our federal legislators to change federal legislation. I don't think that we're going to change the testing situation. But why not? It was created out of nothing. Why cannot we create a new set of rules? We should do that. I would like to see that. I hope you'd like to see that. I thank you for your time, and we're going to present now our board members from C4PEP. I was wondering to say the whole name, but C4PEP's easier. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. We really appreciate all of that good information. Right now, we're going to move on to our panel, and Dr. Trujillo is going to give them 2 prompts, and they're going to speak on each one of those prompts for 3 minutes each. So my long-winded board members, make sure you see the timekeeper back there. Yeah, so anyway, but I want to tell you a little bit about our board members. And we'll wait for the last one here, Ed, to get up here. You sit right here, Ed. Be fine. Thank you. So, start back over there. Daniel Solano, that's the other half of the Solano family here, was a civil rights attorney in his early years. He was the former regional director of MALDEF, which stands for Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And he was the former president of the Hispanic Bar Association and a former professor here at Metro State University. He argued in front of the federal court on segregation in Denver public schools years ago. So he has a background in civil rights law and consumer rights law. Next, Michael Merrifield, Honorable Michael Merrifield. Get my notes because I don't want to leave anything out here. I kind of already know a little bit about him. He was the chair of the House Education Committee when I was the vice chair, so we're really good friends, and we worked hard to pass good legislation and fought against a lot of the stuff that actually became law, unfortunately. But we gave it the good fight, did we, Michael?
We did.
Okay, so he's an award-winning, nationally recognized public education music teacher. Let's give him a hand. He was a teacher for 30 years, and then he ran for office, served in the state legislature, the House for 8 years, and the Senate for 4 years. Okay, and he has always been a strong advocate for art and music in the schools. Thank you, Michael. Dr. Joanne Fujioka. Let me get my notes on you because I want to make sure. I got my pen. Okay. And if I don't get everything right, but this, you will see much more about each one of our board members on our website. If you go to www.a4pep.org, You will see under the About Us part of that, you will see an extensive listing of the board members. But Joanne spent 30 years in pre-K through 12 administration as a school nurse supervisor and a special education manager. She was the president of the Phi Delta Kappa Education Organization and the director at large for the National PTA. Let's give Joanne a hand. Sue Marinelli. Sue. She was a public school reading specialist and a classroom teacher for 31 years, including time teaching students at a juvenile detention center. She served on the Jefferson County School Board, and she worked for one of our lieutenant governors on early childhood programs. Thank you, Sue, for being on the board. Let's give her a hand. Dr. Ed Krug. He is a retired research scientist, counselor, middle school teacher, and a creator of a very successful after-school program that saw most of his participants graduate from high school. So, I mean, that is a huge thing. He chaired school and district accountability committees for Cherry Creek and for DPS. Let's give Dr. Krug a hand. We have other board members that are not able to come today, but if you go to our website, you will see who else is on our board, including myself. But let's get started. So, our first prompt, Dr. Trujillo.
You can give that to the panelists. This is for them. Yeah. By the way, my PowerPoint, I believe, Judy, is that going to be on the...
Yes, we'll get it on that website too.
Okay, so that you can have access to it. All right. I'm just going to start, Dr. Krug, we'll start with you. Okay? The question is, name one education reform policy you would like to see changed and why. And the timekeeper, she's going to gong you, and if somebody just stays past the gong, you get the school bell, because sometimes we respond better to school bells than I never know. Okay.
Starting on timer. I'll start my own timer too. Okay, the reason I joined C4PEP, or rather, the other question, the policy I'd like to see changed really is the same thing that Dr. Trujillo mentioned, high stakes testing. There's a natural law that says high stakes testing corrupts the thing being tested. And in this case, whether it is killing off a species or killing off school programs, it is destructive to education. It narrows the focus of schools. It leads to dropping out many of the skills that contribute toward success as an adult. And the truth is that our public school system is the main structure of society that prepares youth for adulthood. So they're narrowing on the reading, writing, math, and science, but yet in the program that I had that boosted graduation to 96% for participants in one semester, or one school year of participation, the effect was relying on some of the natural laws of society, and that is the nature of people to help others. You create the right environment, people's better angels come forward, they start working in the service of others, we paid them, they start putting a future there, they learned a whole host of skills, and they specifically mentioned patience. That is not covered in the very narrow focus that high stakes testing is enforcing on the teachers. I've come to appreciate that teachers are not the fault. They're victims of the system just as the rest of society is. So again, high stakes testing and all the ripple effects, as well as ripple laws that are built around it. Part of the effect is also it's forcing the state board to comply with those laws. So again, they're not necessarily the problem, they are victims of the same trap. And
It's
to
the
us,
Department of Education. The Department of Education is
Sorry.
the one who handles schools.
yes, I was speaking faster. 2 lessons, short, okay. Every child needs a place to get their hugs, and every child needs a place to be successful. High stakes testing disrupts that.
Thank you. And, okay, Ms. Marinelli.
I'm going to stand up because I'm short. The reason that I joined is I saw many things when I was on the school board. And having been a teacher in the classroom, I was one of those school board people who was in schools all the time, all the time. In fact, I was criticized because I was making the other school board members look bad because they were in classrooms. So, you know, that's how it works sometimes. What I saw teachers spending so much time on test prep that they would drop the real learning experiences. We used to do a simulated town with our kids, and they produced products and they dealt with money. This third graders, we had a great time, but those projects were dropped. Any simulations were dropped, and project learning was dropped. That was the loss, because those are the things that really engaged kids. We also saw a lack of music programs, art, all that kind of thing. We even took PE out of the middle schools. And after school programs that did football and soccer, those things went away. And that has hurt a lot of kids. And you find them, I found them in the detention center. Kids who had no reason to go to school. Why should I take this test? Why should I be there? They were lost. And we've got to reclaim them. In Jeffco, we set up a graduation kind of thing. And what we found was that hooking kids with something, auto mechanics, music, whatever, brought them back into the fold. And that's where I come from. So I'm going to stop it right there. I don't need to go any further.
Thank you.
All right.
And by the way, we did call this a conversation so that you know that each one of you will have an opportunity to speak. We're going to break out into smaller groups and take notes on this and then report back to you. So, but we're going to let each one of them as board members give you their perspective. But instead of talking about what the problem is, let's talk about what you'd like to see changed and why. Dr. Fujioka.
Okay, I had a rough time deciding whether or not I wanted to talk about choice and the impacts of that, or the Senate Bill 191 and the implications of that. And having been an administrator in the school, I'll take on Senate Bill 191 because it has a lot to do with our teachers and how they perform, and being evaluated on the basis and including part of their evaluation being test scores, which is the high stakes testing that we know isn't worth squat in terms of what it does for kids. So as an former administrator in the schools, actually I was in Jeffco when they decided that they were going to give us multiple roles. So not only was I the area manager for special education for a fourth of Jeffco, I also was the assistant principal at an elementary school. So I did evaluations. And let me tell you a little bit about teachers. Teachers don't work for their evaluations. They work for the kids. And that is what they're about, and that's what they're dedicated to, and that's why they're there. Under all the terrible circumstances that we force upon them, they are still in there fighting for the kids. And if we just gave them their heads in terms of what they know about kids and child development and all of those wonderful things, they would do the wonderful job that we expect them to do. But to tie them to a set curriculum, many school districts are giving them word for word almost what they are to teach. And also then rating them by their performance by the kids' test scores, not taking into account any of the other factors that they're dealing with the kids. I think that Senate Bill 191 should be abolished totally. But in lieu of that, I think they need to significantly reduce, and I know they did some of that, significantly reduce the impact of what those test scores are doing for the performance evaluations of teachers. The other thing, just one last point, I know my time's up. I think that for administrators to speak for them as well, it is unreasonable for them to expect to do the number of evaluations effectively that they are asked to do.
Thank you. Senator Marshall, you're out of course, sir. But,
I don't need that.
okay.
Well, thank you very much for coming. If I stand up, I'm not sure I can see my notes, Judy. So it's difficult for me to choose what one so-called reform policy that I would like to see changed, because Judy and I together fought so many bad policies when we were in the legislature. I hated Senate Bill 191. It was the worst night of my life when it was voted and passed. I happened to see Senator Johnson in the hall right after that vote, and I won't tell you what I called it, because it wasn't a polite conversation. And since then, my concerns have been proven to be true, as all of us. But I didn't choose 191. It was driven by this misconceptions that we can evaluate everything and put a score on everything that a kid and a teacher does while they are in school. So my major issue that I would be opposed to would be the value-added measure VAM that is now used to evaluate teachers and students in schools and school districts that states were bribed by the federal government to undertake. You know now that since then, we've learned many things about value-added measurements, and one is they don't work. They're a failure. And I want Colorado to catch up with many other states in the nation and get rid of it. 7 other states have done away with it entirely. A number of states have backed off and changed their percentage numbers. I ran 3 different bills 3 different times to try to do away with it. If I couldn't do away with it, to cut the measurement from 50% to 30% to 20%. I'd take any number if I could get some of my fellow Democrats, of all people, to support me on that legislation. But you know, I only have 30 seconds? Oh my God. You know, those of you who have any experience in the classroom, that it's a failed policy, that you can't measure success of students and teachers through a test, through a standardized test. They do not work. They're unfair. They do measure what kids are having difficulty, have challenges in their lives, in their personal lives, in their social status. That we can get some measurement from. So I'm very passionate about doing away with the so-called standardized testing to measure teachers' ability and teachers' capacities and students' abilities and capacities. So I could go on further. If you want to talk in the hall sometime, I'll catch up.
Thank you, Senator. Can you've been referring to Senate Bill 199. Would you say 191? Would you please say what that is? Just
191 was the evaluation, teacher evaluation program that was put into effect roughly 2007, something like that.
2009.
And
2007.
basically what it
Same year
said.
that I got cancer. I remember.
Yeah, I remember that. So this was, it said that 50% of a teacher's evaluation was based on the test scores that their students received. So if you were in a poverty area, you had a real challenge, didn't you? You know, it seems very unfair. It was a way to get rid of, quote, bad teachers. It never did that because there aren't very many bad teachers.
And the other issue is the testing is
The
done.
testing.
The testing is done during the year when the teacher just inherited students, so that's
Yeah.
another problem. Mr. Solano.
Matt, you're going to have to come over here.
I can do that. Choice. Now, in my opinion, as a civil rights attorney, I've always thought of equity equality, non-discriminatory policies. And then I started hearing about choice. And I thought, that might not be bad. People should be able to have their children go to school with people that they think will better their children. But as choice became integrated into our laws, what I saw is white flight. And what I saw was, when I first started looking at this, I was thinking, how in the hell can I formulate a lawsuit against DPS for the way that they're managing choice? I thought, that's a hell of a lawsuit. I think I could win it. Then reality hit me in the face. When I looked at the Department of Justice regulations, which said choice has nothing to do with education. Choice has everything to do with giving parents a way of focusing their children's education. Nothing about better education in the Department of Justice's regulations. It's about choice. And what they didn't tell any of us was choice meant more administration costs. Oh my God, charter schools, 175. Then you have the school board, you have the administration in the public schools, and then you have the administration costs in charter schools. Choice equals administration equals costs. Duplication of administrative costs. That's choice, and that's wrong. That's a bad use of public education funds. The reality of the situation is we've got to rethink choice and start talking about choice in terms of what the kids want to do in their classroom, like art, music, other areas of interest that will keep those children in school. So let's talk about choice, and let's talk about choice in reality.